Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about politics. Now, this is a subject I try to avoid a little bit on this channel, but I can't help it. Sometimes it's just there, and you have to mention it. So, this was an article that I stumbled across, and it says, quote, "How pro wrestling explains today's GOP." That's the Republican Party for my non-American friends. So it says, quote, "The battle between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump could split the party with surprising results," argues the author of a new book on Vince McMahon. So, this is from March 24th, 2023. So, this is written by a guy named Michael Cruz, and it's an interview with Abraham Reisman, the guy who thinks he's a woman, who wrote a book, Ringmaster Vince McMahon and the Unmasking of America. So we're going to go through this interview. And I just want to be honest, because sometimes I think conversations are harmed by people trying to be nice or trying to be mean or whatever. I just want to be honest. I'm really at the point of just completely and totally ignoring things that trans people say, mainly because if somebody is operating so far outside of reality that they think they're a woman when they're a man, they typically don't have anything worth talking about. Okay, first get your life in order, then criticize the world, the old Jordan Peterson thing. But because I do believe in individualism and that individuals matter more than whatever neurosis or mental illness they may have, it would be a hypocritical for me to just completely ignore what somebody says because of what kind of person they are. So I read this article and gave it a fair read, and I actually think there's some really good points to be made. There's a lot of stuff to discuss in here. That being said, you're going to come up against a wall where you have to remember that Abraham Weissman refers to himself as Josephine and goes by female pronouns. And this person is male. Okay. That cannot go too far from your mind. That when this person is criticizing other people, especially for living a lie or being anti-truth or whatever the case may be, this is a man who thinks he is a woman. So that needs to be kept in context. Now, also, it is simply bad rhetoric to belittle somebody just because of who or what they are. That's why I'm talking about this early and not talking about it a little bit later, because this guy being a tranny does not make him wrong. Doesn't make him right, but it doesn't make him wrong. It just means that he engages in something that is very weird and that most people don't agree with, and most people will find is a really huge flaw. And because I wanted to start with this issue, I wanted to get it out of the way early. So for people who might say, well, Mongo, you're transphobic, I don't want to listen to you. Okay, see you later. I'll catch you on the next one. On people who may say, well, at least Mongo is saying that, hey, this guy is what he is. And now we're going to get into his thoughts, which is the deeper the point of, this article is to actually get into what this guy thinks and what his political opinions are, etc. And you can't go into that without first dealing with the man himself, So this is a man who thinks he's a woman who wrote a book on Vince McMahon. It's supposedly a biography. It wouldn't be an autobiography. It's a biography on Vince McMahon. And let's get into this. After a little preamble, let's talk about it. Wrestling, writes Reisman, has metastasized into the broader world, especially since the inauguration of our 45th president. There's a little difference between Trumpism and Vince's neo-kayfabe, each with their infinite and indistinguishable layers of irony and sincerity. Each philosophy approaches life with one goal: to remake reality in such a way as to defeat one's enemies and sate one's insecurities. Now, you may be asking yourself, what the hell is neo-kayfabe? That doesn't exist. It's not a real thing in wrestling. But this is an idea that was created by Abraham Weissman. And this is something that I'll actually want to talk about, because this is an important piece of when you're talking about in this article. So later in the article, Weissman actually defines neo-kayfabe. And since, leftists love their things that you can put on a bumper sticker, the right does too. I'm a libertarian, by the way, So the definition of neo-kayfabe actually comes in about in the middle, near the end of the article. He says, quote, "Kayfabe is this old multi-purpose term that emerges from traveling circuses, which is where wrestling emerges from. It's all centered around the big lie of wrestling, theatrical wrestling, for the first century of its existence. And that big lie was that what you see in the ring is what you get, that it's real, that this is a legitimate sporting competition. Everybody had to be in character. You really had to commit to it anytime you were out in public. What happens in the mid to late 80s is Vince takes power from his father, buys it from his father, and he starts making this product that is more outlandishly ridiculous in some ways than any wrestling that had come before. Stuff that was so obviously entertainment, and that not a sport, that he started calling his product sports entertainment. And kayfabe is basically over at that point, and wrestling sort of flounders for a number of years. It's very difficult for the promoters in that period to get people interested because old kayfabe is gone. The suspension of disbelief isn't there anymore. So what ends up happening, and it's not just Vince who does it, but it's Vince who really codifies it, is that you get this phenomenon that I, perhaps vainly, have named neo-kayfabe. You are operating not with the assumption that what you're seeing is real. In fact, you are operating with the very firm belief that what you are seeing is fake. But in that fakeness, a promoter or wrestler will toss in little bits of seemingly behind-the-scenes truth. What appears to be behind-the-scenes truth in that context of this wider lie. And that, I think, should hopefully sound familiar to all of us who pay attention to politics these days. This is a very good term because it is very accurate when you look at modern-day politics. When you look at modern-day politics and you listen to modern-day politicians, you know, if you're in any way intelligent, 99% of the stuff they're telling you is bullshit. Okay? They're lying. When they come out here and they start standing on these stages, some of them actually go as far as to actually do open performances. Like this new guy they found in Tennessee. I don't remember his name, not because I'm uninformed, but because he's unimportant. So these people they found in Tennessee who started doing Martin Luther King cosplay, they do this stuff, and you know, watching at home, that this is absolutely phony. You know that it's a performance. You see in Canada, the male legislators are wearing high heels to stand with domestic violence. You look at this performance, and you just say to yourself, this is absolutely phony. And yet you go along with it. You look at these people knowing that they are not qualified to run your household for you, let alone run, your business or anything else that you might be attached to, and yet you go with it anyway. Whether it's Trump or DeSantis or Joe Biden or whatever, it's like a lot of people know that certain people are full of shit, and they go along with it anyway. That is neo-kayfabe. A lot of people know politicians and politics is phony as all hell, and they still go for it. They still follow along. They still find it entertaining. They see these people preaching and performing. You see LeBron James, and he's got a book in his hand, and you know he ain't read that book. You know that. But you see a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. You see AOC. She gets arrested, quote unquote, but there's no handcuffs. She just got her hands behind her back. You know it's phony, but how many people will absolutely positively see AOC doing phony stuff, still defend her. Still believe it. Still believe it when she opens her mouth that she was sexually harassed or whatever the hell. And this is the reality nowadays. That, you know, here in Detroit, there was, you know, the young lady, the congressman, what was her name? The one who supposedly had a Palestinian grandmother that she was trying to go visit. But it was really just an anti-Israel thing that she wanted to do. It's like, we all know it's funny. And only the low IQ think that it's real, you know? Because most of the time it's pure entertainment anyway. I mean, look at the campaign trail. You know, Kamala Harris literally had, what was this, I'm That Girl or something like that, where she called Joe Biden a racist for being against busing. And, you know, how is it that she can stand flat-footed and call this man a racist for weeks and weeks and weeks? And then he decides that, well, she's going to be my running mate. And so all of a sudden he's not racist anymore? His racism is absolved now? See, that's the thing that I'm talking about here. You know, this stuff is a good example of what Reisman is talking about. This is a very good term, you know, the neo-kayfabe, because we're looking at something that's obviously funny, but it's enough reality dipped into it where people will say, no, it's not fake. It ain't, it's real. And it's like, is it though? You know, is it real though? Because I'm thinking it's not. I'm thinking it's not. All right, let's consider his, continue his point. Think about Trump. He would say stuff you're not supposed to say, and that's what everyone loved about him. I mean, Frank Rich wrote a story for the magazine that I was working on about how Trump was saving our democracy. This was in 2015, saying that he was saying what other people weren't willing to say about how stupid this system was, and maybe that would wake people up. Well, I don't know that it woke people up to make them change the world for the better, but it certainly grabbed their attention, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters now. Can you grab people's attention? Absolutely. This is another good point that he made. You know, yes, the news media and these politicians, they know it's not about facts. It's about attention. Can you get people talking about you? One of Trump's biggest advantages was that in saying mean things, he was on television literally all the time. So he was getting free marketing because they literally talked about him all day long. In fact, Trump has been out of office for 2 years now or something like that. And they still talk about him pretty much every day, all over the news. He's going to get arrested. They're doing this. They're raiding his home. They're constantly talking about him. It's all free promotion. And to be quite honest, you can't buy that kind of exposure. I remember, and I talked about it on this channel before, the rapper Eazy-E, who was mistakenly sent a invitation to the Republican National Convention or something like that. It was or a dinner with the president or something. And he went, you know, knowing that it was obviously a mistake, that it wasn't meant for him, but he went anyway. And he got loads of attention from it. And he laughed about it, saying, look, usually you pay a marketing firm millions and millions of dollars for this kind of attention. So politicians know attention is the black oil. It's the Texas tea of politics. You can't win if you can't get in front of the cameras. Ask any third party candidate about this. They'll tell you, you know, getting left off of the campaign trail, nobody talking about you on TV, you not being able to get on the debate stage. All these things prevent you from winning. In order to win, you have to get in front of the cameras. And Trump realized that if he says outrageous things, people will point a camera in his direction. Now, that wasn't why he was saying outrageous things. He was probably saying outrageous things because he simply believed them. But because he was saying outrageous things, he got a lot of attention. And because he got a lot of attention, he was able to send out his message. And a lot of people was able to connect with that message because they were inundated with it over and over and over again, even by his enemies. So this is a really good point. And this is something that politicians know because most of the time they drum up attention. Going back to AOC showing up at the border where she had this obviously fake picture of her crying as she supposedly looks at the wall or the fences or whatever. And it was all bullshit. And she knew, and you knew it was bullshit, and she knew it was bullshit, but she took these pictures anyway. Again, with her, you're getting fake arrested. They do this stuff anyway to get in front of the cameras. Maxine Waters, when she popped up at one of these places where they were rioting in 2020, you know, just getting in front of the cameras. They know what they're doing. You know, it's not a surprise whenever a politician shows up somewhere and there's plenty of cameras, you know, flashing, because it is all about getting attention. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, this is all a setup. It's all phony. You know, these debates are usually pretty phony. These interviews, 100% phony. Sometimes they even know the questions before they're asked. So these things are completely and totally phony in the same way that Reisman is talking about. But it's all about getting people's attention. And that's a very good point. He continues, and Vince figured out a long time ago that a great way to grab people's attention is just have people say the unsayable and do the unthinkable and toss out things that are true. I think the parallels is kind of obvious. And I hope that this is a moment where we can sort of wake up to the fact that the strategy of just fact-checking the other side doesn't work. Because that's not what fascism believes. It doesn't believe in consistency. It doesn't believe in all the truth or all the lie. It believes in total chaos. And that's what we have under neo-kayfabe. This is one of those times where I say, I want to remind you that this is a man who thinks he's a woman. So when you say somebody doesn't believe in consistency, what is more inconsistent than the left's belief that men can be women and women can be men, and these things are malleable, and you could be neither, or you can be both, or you could have two spirits? Like, what could be more chaotic than that? Some people have, you know, I think it was on Twitter. I think it was the Hodge twins or something like that, whatever those guys are called. They saw some new government site that has pretty much every list of gender identity, which is masculine, non-conforming, and feminine, femboy, or whatever. It's like that's chaos right there. So the idea that we live in a neo-kayfabe created by the Republicans who want nothing more than fascist chaos, which is not fascism, by the way. Fascism is literally the opposite of this. I'll talk about that in a moment. But when you have people that they push chaos literally all day long, men in dresses, you know, calling them she, and it's a man in a dress, you know, pretending people who are criminals are saints. I mean, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of things like, you know, George Floyd and these kinds of people, but, you know, when a lot of your heroes are convicted rapists or pederasts or people who have pulled guns on pregnant women, it's like, can't we find some people who weren't criminals and lionize them? Like, why are all of our new saints criminals? Like, why are all of them like drug addicts and thieves and armed robbers? I mean, these are the people that, you know, they build statues for, and they, you know, they're rioting over them. It's like, wait a minute. We can't do better than this. We can't do better than fentanyl addicts who used to rob people. We can't do better than that in terms of individuals we should lionize in our society, even if you think what happened to this person is wrong. And you can still believe that. But even a rational person would say to themselves, I would not build a monument to somebody who violently robbed a pregnant woman. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't build a monument to a fentanyl addict. I wouldn't, have a mural to these people. It's the kind of stuff that, he's talking about something that is factual, but he doesn't really understand that it applies so much to his side of the argument. Now, people on the right, they typically have this belief that family values, and they'll say Trump is not a family values guy. He had plenty of affairs. He's, had, and that's not technically what the kind of conservative, quote unquote, Donald Trump is. Donald Trump isn't even really a conservative. Donald Trump is a Northeast Republican, which is essentially a Democrat. If we're being honest, same thing with Vince McMahon. I talked about on this channel before, Vince McMahon is not some Bible thumping Republican. Vince McMahon did interviews in Playboy. All right. Vince McMahon openly talked about using drugs. He admitted to using steroids. When the Vince McMahon, as we know him, is a Republican really in name only. He's a Republican on issues that affect his business. Okay. He's a rhino. All right. But when you look at maybe his social policy, Vince is not much different than anybody else. He had a gay best friend in Pat Patterson. He's hired gay people. He's tried to push the women's lib issue, as what they probably called it back when he was a kid, women's lib, otherwise known as feminism. All that kind of stuff. He's gone through it. The idea that these people believe that Vince McMahon is some kind of Bible thumping theocrat is based almost completely on their false stereotype of what Republicans are. Republicans, much like other people, can be very well defined by the environment that they come from. For instance, a lot of Southern Democrats tend to be closer to Republicans. That used to be the case. It's not really the case anymore. Now they're pretty much all Democrats come from California or New York now, even if you live in Georgia, which is why, this idea is their ideas are going to fail, because Atlanta is not New York. Houston is not Los Angeles, but, that's just a policy issue. So the idea that Vince McMahon is some kind of Bible thumping theocrat, you can forget it. Neither is Donald Trump. These are guys who basically just want to do business, love the country, and be left alone. And to me, that's enough. I'm good with that. As a citizen, if all you want to do is argue about taxes all day, be my guest, as long as you ain't trying to dictate my life. And as far as I know, Donald Trump and Vince McMahon aren't really trying to dictate my life. Well, Donald Trump in some ways, because he was president, is a little bit different. Because, especially his issues when it comes to the Second Amendment, definitely a bigger problem than Vince. Vince is just a guy who wants to run a business and bang his secretaries, which I don't care about. Sorry. I know that upsets a lot of people, but I don't give a damn about what adults do. If it was non-consensual, she should have went to the police. If it was, that apparently wasn't the case. Now, fascism. This is one of the things that just kind of gives me a headache, is whenever the leftists just throw around the word fascist. It's similar in measure to the right, who throw around the word communism all the time, as most people tend to forget what it really is. But the right has a better scope of what communism is but what the left considers fascism. This guy says that fascism believes in chaos. It's like, I'm sorry? Fascism believes in chaos? No. Fascism is literally excessive order. It is the state in control of everything. Mussolini writes that everything within the state, nothing outside of the state. And Italy created fascism. All right. Mussolini in Italy created fascism. What fascism is the government in control of every conceivable industry through usually unions. So so you'll have something similar to what we almost have here in Michigan, where the unions are really in bed with the state, and then the unions essentially control the industry because they have a monopoly on labor. So essentially, the unions control the industry. And since the unions work for the state controls the unions, therefore the state controls the industry. So that's not chaos. That's not chaos at all. It's central planning, which is a tenet of communism and socialism and fascism. So the idea that fascism is all about, excessive chaos is kind of nonsense. And it shows that this guy doesn't have any idea about fascism, but that's typical of the left. Thomas Sowell said something that was very intelligent when he said that there really is no definition of right wing. It's basically just a garbage dump for the left. The left says this is right wing, and all of a sudden the right just takes it up. They said racism is right wing, even though the progressive era of the United States is profoundly racist. Unions used to be racist, for instance. You could probably find old Democrat posters that are racist as hell, with black people being depicted as gorillas or rapists or whatever. It was what it was at that time. Of course, that's different than today, but that's what it was at the time. The idea of racism, eugenics was initially a left-wing idea. Hitler believed in eugenics. A lot of people on the left believe in eugenics. In fact, Margaret Sanger, one of the left's favorite people, the mother of Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist. Eugenics has always been a tenet of the left. Even today, they talk about abortion in terms of eugenics, in terms of poor people who can't afford to have children should just go and kill their babies. They were talking about, hey, we should be able to have designer babies, genetically modify our children to have, the color eyes that we want, the color hair that we want. They believe in that transhumanism. That's where you get transgenderism from, because we can have surgeries and change what people look like and what people, if we can give people surgeries to change their brain or whatever, we would do that. Okay, the left has been on that stuff forever. But then all of a sudden, eugenics became right wing when they have no use for it anymore. And, so then you start seeing a lot of people who are usually leftists who start talking about eugenics. They end up getting pushed to the right. And the right ends up take up some of its stuff sometimes. Sometimes you'll see people who are on the right take up left-wing causes. Like, collectivism is, another one. For instance, the people on the right who really are fascists, racism, which is on the right-wing racism, let's put it like that, because racism is collectivism, and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, the right is just a dumping ground for the left. It's simply the refuse that ideas that have been demonized that the left no longer wants anything to do with. So typically speaking, the left have always been the fascists, and they still believe in fascism. They still believe that, industries should be run by quote unquote the workers. And you ask them about it, they'll openly say that that's how it should be. They openly support unions. These companies should be controlled by the unions, and the unions should report to the state, because the unions can't exist without the state. So are they fascists? Yeah, they're fascists. They've always been fascists. FDR was a fascist. But you're not supposed to know this stuff. That's the thing about the fakeness of it, the neo-kayfabe of it. You're not supposed to know this. You're supposed to just shut up, listen to what they say, and listen to how they use certain words. Fascism is just one of the things that they blow up completely out of proportion, because there really is no right-wing fascism. Libertarianism, which has come to sort of dominate the right to a degree, is in no way fascist. Even right-wing theocrats technically aren't fascists. Even somebody like, what's his name? Tucker Carlson, for instance, right? Tucker Carlson is very in tune with the lower class of the United States. Remember, if you haven't seen his conversation with Ben Shapiro, you should go watch it. And Ben Shapiro is a sort of neocon in terms of he is from California. He wants to fight against certain controls because California has these controls and he understands how it operates in a society. But Tucker Carlson is a Luddite. So he starts talking about AI cars and how in trucks and all these sorts of things, how it could cost men their jobs and it's going to destroy families. And, you know, capitalism isn't a religion. I care more about families than I care about capitalism, which is, you probably should. But at the same time, you have to understand that Tucker Carlson is talking about taking control of an industry, that being the trucking industry, and trying to make it so these guys can keep their jobs. Instead of saying, well, look, these jobs are obsolete now. Apparently, there's going to be something else doing them. It's time to move on and do something else, which is kind of what Ben Shapiro is saying. He's like, no. We have to take control of this industry to keep these families together. Now, that's actually closer to what the left wants to do, you know? So it's not as cut and dry as people would think. But these issues that, generally speaking, we just call everybody on the right a fascist, is, you know, it's bullshit. And most people have no idea what fascism is. Now, this is a very interesting point he's going to make. I'm finally going to stop ripping about fascism, okay? I'm sorry. Reisman has asked a question about Democrats and Republicans who watched wrestling in the 80s and 90s and grew up on Hulk Hogan. And Reisman responds saying, quote, "We learned that the most important thing is entertaining people. Basically, the most important thing is pushing people's buttons. And also learning that you can be successful and be a heel. You can be somebody who is hated and you can profit off that hatred. And success in being hated, that's such a key part of the Trump phenomenon. People think that by hating him and tweeting about how bad he is, they're somehow stabbing against him. But that's the same way that people thought they were making a point by taking down Vince McMahon, by buying t-shirts that say Stone Cold because Stone Cold Steve Austin was Vince's rival in a storyline. But Vince McMahon owns it. He makes all the money off the t-shirt. That's what happened with Trump, and not just Trump, George Santos, any number of politicians. It's how you succeed now. This is also a really awesome point that he's making here. It's called controlled opposition, where you can be the villain, but you also control the babyface. It's like, hey, this is what happens a lot in politics. This is sort of the situation that we're in right now in terms of Democrats and Republicans. Because for a lot of people, the Republicans are the opponents for the Democrats. But quite often, what ends up happening is the opposing party ends up really choosing the other person. What you see right now in modern day politics, in current year, in current moment, in April of 2023, is the media has to make a decision. And the media is largely Democratic. They're going to make the decision over who the Democrat will be fighting in the presidential election. They're going to make that decision. The individuals, the people, are not really going to make that decision. The media is going to make that decision. Is it going to be DeSantis or is it going to be Trump? Now, in the past, what we saw, and this is what, you know, a lot of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro types believe, is that Trump is a loser. And the media is once again hyping up Trump because they want to use Trump as a bludgeon against the Republican Party. Therefore, Trump is controlled opposition. That they have now realized how to beat Trump in these elections. And they've beaten a lot of Trump candidates, you know, people that he has endorsed, has lost. So they've figured out the secret of beating Trump. They haven't figured out how to beat DeSantis. So what they want to do is they want to control the narrative to make sure that Trump is the candidate, which makes it easier for them to win in the end. It's a psyop, right? And that's a really good point, because what easier way to win than to control who the opposition brings out? The Republican and or Democrat will be created by the media. And sometimes this creation will be wholly a media creation. This person will actually have never done horrible things to anybody or whatever. And the media will come out and say these things anyway. Give you a really good example of this, Brett Kavanaugh, right? This is a guy who was a judge for years and years and years and years and years. Nobody ever said anything negative about this guy. All of a sudden, it's time for him to go on the Supreme Court. All of a sudden, he's a rapist. And you're like, wait a minute. This guy's has been a judge for decades. And now he's a rapist? Where was this woman 5 years ago when he was a judge? Where was he 10 years ago when he was a judge? The bottom line is they were trying to control the opposition. They were saying, hey, we don't want this guy. We're going to make him unelectable. And we do that by labeling him a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a rapist, or whatever. And then, they expected the Republicans to do what they usually do, which is pull back and then put somebody out who's more moderate. And they've been doing this stuff. This is how it works all the time. Usually the left will push out somebody, Bernie Sanders. He's too much of a socialist. Bernie Sanders will say something that really riles up the left-wing base. The right will beat him over the head with his support of Russia and all this kind of stuff. And then, the Democrats will grab Bernie Sanders and push him to the back of the line. But he'll say enough stuff that the Democrat that can most likely win will then adopt some of those ideas and he'll get pushed forward. And that Democrat will then be a little bit more palatable for the Republicans, considering he won't actually be Bernie Sanders. He will actually, pick up certain Bernie Sanders talking points, but he won't actually be Bernie Sanders. It means he'll just say the stuff, but he'll actually be more malleable on ideas because these aren't really his ideas. They're just things he's saying to win. Again, it's all phony. It's all bullshit. The true believers are usually just churned up and spit out in this system. The people who truly believe the shit that they say, the Ron Pauls and even the Bernie Sanders, they truly believe the shit they say. But more people will just take bits and pieces from Ron Paul, but promise not to go as far as he wants to go. And that will be enough to get certain Republicans. And it will be enough to make Democrats comfortable because he still might be easy to beat. And then that's how this system is created. Through finding true believers and actually mining their ideas through the process of the campaign. You steal ideas from people, and then the media will shape the narrative. And at that point, both have controlled their oppositions. So neither really seems too extreme, no matter how extreme the talking points get. When you really get to it, neither seems too extreme. And Joe Biden is no different. Joe Biden is not as extreme as most people think, but there are people within his faction that are really, really extreme. And since he's essentially a corpse, what happens is the people around him take control of the situation and they do what they do. And it was the same thing with Trump. The people around him basically controlled the administration. And it's been that way for years and years. This is why when Trump came out and said, you want to drain the swamp, everybody was like, wait a minute, I'm the swamp. I'm the unelected official that's been here for decades and decades and decades. I was sitting here when Bill Clinton was in office, and that's the person that Trump is talking about. So that person is like, nope, I have all this entrenched power. I'm in control. Great example of this was Anthony Fauci. This guy was an unelected official and was in power in the 80s, right? This guy had so much authority. Not only was he in government when Bill Clinton was in office, he was in government before Bill Clinton even got in office. There's so many people who are voting today that were not even born when Bill Clinton was in office. So that should tell you right there who really controls the government. And you saw a lot of the hatred for Trump really kind of bubble out of that, is that he was standing over the target. The target being that the politicians don't really control Washington. That's why I don't really care about them. The issue is the administration. It's the administrative state. It's the people who can get a job fresh out of high school or fresh out of college and be there for the next 30 or 40 years. It's a fact. Those people do control the government. And Trump was right. If you start trying to attack the administrative state, you're talking about, you're Ron Paul talking about auditing the Fed or getting rid of the ATF or something like that. No. They're not going to let you do that. That's when you start controlling the opposition. You start finding Republicans who don't want to get rid of the FBI, but instead want to expand FBI powers because, hey, let's find this crazy Republican who wants to, instead of shutting down the FBI, he wants to use it to investigate Hillary Clinton. So guess what? The guy who everybody would agree with, if he was actually, you actually get him in front of a camera, that we need to get rid of the FBI. Oh no, we're going to ignore that guy. Let's find this crazy motherfucker over here who actually wants to turn the FBI over to Hillary Clinton. Because once he does that, or once he says that, that gives us carte blanche to do whatever we want to do with the FBI. Because at least he's not going to get rid of it. Okay? He may misuse it, but he's not going to get rid of it. And that becomes the big win. When people like Betsy DeVos or somebody like that, you start seeing these people. And you wonder, like, if the Republicans truly believed all the stuff that they believed, a lot of these departments and things like that they've been talking about for years, they would have just shut them down if they could. If Trump was really a crazy libertarian, why did the FBI continue to exist? He could have wrote a stroke of a pen and closed it. The ATF could have closed it immediately. Most libertarians, if you talk to them, that'd be the first damn thing they do. First 2 days in office, a lot of government bureaucrats would be gone. The Department of Education, gone. You know, all these kind of things, the Department of Arts and Sciences and all that kind of, no, that doesn't really exist. But I'm just saying, like, all of these different departments would be gone, you know, but it never happens because it becomes a system not only of controlled opposition, but also through the patronage system. The patronage system is you actually give jobs to people who helped you. So somebody like Linda McMahon, you know, so that's a good example for this article that we're using here. She helped Trump get in office. When Trump gets in office, he gives her a job over Small Business Administration. Do we really need that? No. But you got to pay back the people who helped you. So he gives her a job. He can't destroy that department. He can use it to pay favors, or to either give favors to people who he wants to help him, or give rewards to people who have already helped him. And that's kind of how our political system works, and that's why it's so damn corrupt. And you see it literally all the time. This is kind of one of those backdoor deals. Somebody like Pete Buttigieg, right? You know, a guy who ran for president. You know, he probably got told in a back room somewhere, hey, you can't win if you shut up and you endorse Joe Biden. We will get you a job in the administration. That's exactly what happened. Is he good at that job? No. But should that department that he's even over, which I think is the Department of Transportation, should that even exist? No. But you can't get rid of it. And any crazy libertarian like Mongo who would say we need to get rid of that department, they'll never win an election. Never. Controlled opposition will always find somebody who is mild on the subject, who will say, you know what? I want to get rid of the Department of Transportation, but it's not on my agenda. I'm not too concerned about it. Oh, that guy's better. So the media is going to talk about him. The Republicans are going to talk about him. Democrats are going to talk about him. We're going to control the opposition by forcing out people who are too crazy and, you know, might actually either A, wake people up to how real shit is getting, or B, might actually do the crazy stuff that they're talking about, you know? So, and that's typically how things work. But then, of course, you get in situations like California where these people are both crazy and are willing to do the things that they talk about. And New York is one of those places too. And you see how those things are going. You know, people are just fleeing from those places. I want to reiterate something that Reisman said, because I want to talk about this too. Because it's not just a matter of controlled opposition. It's also a matter of the inadvertent bump that people do. He says, quote, People think that by hating Trump and tweeting about how bad he is, that they're stabbing against him. But that's the way that people thought they were making a point by taking down Vince McMahon by buying t-shirts that say Stone Cold. And Stone Cold was Vince's rival in the storyline. But Vince McMahon owns it. He makes all the money off the t-shirt. That's what happens with Trump. This is also what happens in situations where, and this happens a lot in conservative circles now, where I see more trannies from the right than I ever see from the left. I have blocked so many right-wing accounts for retweeting Dylan Mulvaney. I had to block Dylan Mulvaney's name on Twitter because the right wing was tweeting about this person all day long. Anytime Dylan Mulvaney did anything, there was Matt Walsh and Daily Wire, and everybody was tweeting about it. Dylan Mulvaney was in the Bud Light fiasco. It was all day long. You think that you're arguing against this person. But again, as we have discussed in this piece so far, it's all about attention. So you increase this person's profile because this person went from being somebody only a few people know to now being something that everybody knows, because the left has this person as the baby face. They're constantly talking about them, how great they are, how stunning and brave they are. And then the right are constantly tweeting about it too. But they're talking about how horrible and evil and devilish this person is, and how this person will never be a woman and all this kind of stuff. It gets so bad. Liz of TikTok, for instance. Now, I'm not saying I'm against the account. But what I'm saying is Liz of TikTok created a vicious cycle where you started seeing more psychopaths on Twitter than ever before. One of the worst possible things about social media is how the right perpetrates in attempting to argue against this stuff. How much they perpetrate it. How much they give attention to things that most people would not even know is happening, but they talk about it. Therefore, they're putting their camera on it. Therefore, they're giving attention to it, which again gives them ability to make money. The Tennessee guy, the fake MLK. It wasn't until the right started talking about him and his phony MLK cosplay that he started getting so much attention, right? And then what happens? He started escalating. He started going out more. He started going in other places. He started doing podcasts. He started getting more attention. He became more successful, temporarily, of course, because the right kept talking about him so much. They made him into a superstar. He became a political football. But it's a simple situation that Reisman is talking about. This guy who is always had and has been on one side of this issue, except for now, more people know that he exists. And you think, well, more people know that he exists, or more people fight against him. Well, that's what you would think. But instead, what you're doing is spreading his message. Instead of starving this person for attention, giving them nothing, instead you give them everything that they always wanted, which is more people talking about them, his name, and more. You can't buy that kind of marketing. It's there. And I hate it so much. I cannot stand it. But it's how our politics has been working since Facebook. It's the same thing. Again, I talked about it earlier with Donald Trump. The left was consuming so much Donald Trump media, and it was all hatred, but they were consuming so much of it that Trump was like the #1 thing Googled on Google, and it was all there, just literally all the time. There was an obsession with it. And now the right have become obsessive over issues. So now they're just tweeting out trannies and trans kids and stuff literally all day. And you're like, why are you consuming so much of this media? You think that you're arguing against it. What you're really doing is spreading it. Why? How are they spreading it? Well, every time somebody like a Matt Walsh, he's public enemy #1. He comes out and he makes an article about, or he talks about somebody, that makes the left defend them even more. Again, it's no different than, if you want to put it in wrestling terms, it's the heat spot. You know, the heel is kicking the babyface while they're down. You know, then they're turning to the crowd. Are you not entertained? And boo. Meanwhile, this person is, let's say, Jazz Jennings or something like that, you know, Matt Walsh spends 10 minutes talking about. That's the heat spot. He's punching them in the head, kicking them while he's down. And everybody on the left is booing Matt Walsh. Boo. Boo. And they're taking their time to cheer the tranny. Oh, come on, get up. You're so stunning. You're so brave. And I just say to myself, like, why? Why are you doing this? Like, it's okay to talk about it, you know, because we all need content. You know, we're all content creators. I understand the space. But you have to realize at some point, people get the issue, they get the picture, right? We know these psychopaths exist. Why are you tweeting about every single one of them? Why is everything near, you know, the end of the world? You know, like, it's not all the end of the world. If you want to have one issue and you want to beat that drum, like, you know, the drag queens in the library, okay. But Bud Light wanting to have some tranny do commercial, I don't care. You know, you want to talk about it? All right, sure. I don't care. But we're going to dig through this person's Instagram and retweet all the stuff. There's people retweeting, doing the old thing, retweeting old videos when Dylan Mulvaney was a boy. And it's like, this is stupid, right? This obsession over this person is so dumb. And yet the right has it. They will obsess over these people and essentially create their own opposition. You know, it's just like having a wrestling match, for Christ's sake. All right, let's get to the end of this thing, because I think the end of it is what is probably my favorite. So Michael Cruz starts talking about, all right, so we know that Trump likes to play the heel, so who's the face? And Reisman says, I would say much more. Being the face doesn't pay, because you're always going to have another side that reflexively hates you. You're not going to win over the other side. Whereas if you're a heel, you have one side loving you and the other side, you're profiting off their hatred. It's the only way to actually make it now. And then he starts talking about DeSantis and Trump. And this is very interesting. Michael Cruz says, you compared Trump and DeSantis to Hogan and Ultimate Warrior being booked against each other in 1990 at WrestleMania 6. And Reisman goes on to explain, in wrestling, a babyface or a face is the good guy and the heel is the bad guy. In whatever match or overarching storyline is happening at any given moment, you can change from one side to another. Some people hardly ever do, but some wrestlers and other figures have been heels. They've been faces and they've gone back and forth. It's very malleable. But at any snapshot in a moment, if you are the one that the crowd is supposed to be saying, I hope this person wins, you're the face. And if you're the person that the crowd is booing and saying, ooh, I hope he loses, you're the heel. And in 1990, Vince executed a very risky maneuver, which was that he had in the biggest match of the year, the main event of WrestleMania, the two faces going against each other. Hogan and Warrior were both faces, and Hogan was the champ and Warrior was the up-and-coming who was very popular. And they were going to have this match, and it was mind-blowing for the fans. To the Republican electorate, I think Trump and DeSantis might be two faces. And, of course, they talk about both of them are heels to the left, which, of course, makes sense. And he says, you need to know who the right targets are to get the reaction that you want from the crowd. And the smartest Republican politicians right now, or at least the ones who are successful, are the ones who have figured out how to be loved for being hated. And then you're their hero. This is part of the confusion and the chaos of the neo-kayfabe. You can be a heel to your foe and still get pops and cheers from the crowd. In the dark world of wrestling in the mid to late 90s, irreverence and crassness and cruelty was very popular, as long as it was pointed at people you thought were lame or bad or whatever, you know? Now let's talk about this for a minute. We'll get back to the Trump and DeSantis being Hogan and Warrior in 98. We'll talk about in 1990. We'll talk about that in a moment. I like this part right here. He said, in the dark world of wrestling of the mid to late 90s, irreverence and crassness and cruelty was very popular, as long as it was pointed at people you thought were lame or bad. This is true. This is what we mean by the audience turn heel, right? If you were a good guy drinking milk, talking about, say your prayers or whatever, you get booed out of the building. You're not edgy enough. You're not mean spirited enough. And it's been going on for 25 years. We know this in terms of wrestling. But think about what he's saying in terms of politics. He's saying that Trump is a babyface because he points out to people that the right, the edgy right, let's put it like that, have decided is lame. Trannies and LGBT and the media, political Democratic politicians, etc. And he's both crass and irreverent and cruel to them. And therefore, these people cheer Trump because he's saying things that they would like to say. This is absolutely true. Trump is more loved for being an asshole than most people can possibly imagine. That's 99% of the draw of Donald Trump, is that he is 100% asshole. But that's good, right? He's telling people what he truly believes about them. And in turn, they say the same thing about him. But here's the issue. Like usual, Reisman is pointing this thing at one side of the situation and saying, well, this is what they're doing now. This is how things have been forever. I mean, we've talked about this. It is irreverence and crassness and cruelty. For Christ's sake, the left made entire career off this stuff. I mean, it's been going on for 80 years. They turn pretty much anything, that the right holds sacred. They have been impossibly obtuse in attacking it. The founding fathers of the United States, taking down their statues, calling them slave owners. And well, even though that's a factual statement, calling them rapists, which could also be a factual statement. The dumping paint on people who wear fur coats, attacking people on social media for jokes and things like this. Excessive cruelty? No, there is more than one side to this. I mean, Jon Stewart spent years and years and years on Comedy Central making fun of Republicans. You would think that every Republican was a toothless retard if you got your politics from The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. If you got your politics from, which a lot of people did, especially young people. Young people were basically taught that Christians were lame, therefore we do things like put the Bible in the toilet, or put the cross in the toilet, and that's art all of a sudden. Creating artistic things that make fun of people. Talking about, what was this? The Black Panthers, Eldridge Cleaver said that he wanted to beat Ronald Reagan to death with a marshmallow. Is that not cruel? Is that not crass? This is kind of stuff, and he said this in like the 70s. Now, these kind of things have been going back and forth. It's now really that the right are starting to do it. That it's become respectability politics. We're supposed to respect people. But it's like, no. The left has been doing this stuff literally forever. The left has started waving the white flag of respectability politics and people in their humanity and all this kind of stuff. Soon as the right started getting their knuckles bloody when it comes to being crass and being mean. And they forget 30 or 40 years of Democrats writing books, movies, television shows, talking about how Republicans marry their cousins or how they're all toothless rednecks and all this kind of stuff, making fun of them, talking about their religion. I mean, somebody like Bill Maher, comes up with this religiosity movie, or you have people spending so much time making fun of Mormons and their magic underwear when it's when Mitt Romney was running for president. You have this kind of stuff literally all day. You disrespect somebody's religion, disrespect their family, disrespect the voters, talk about how every Republican district is flyover country or whatever the fuck. And then when people started to punch back, which is really what gave Donald Trump his power is the fact that he was offensive. For the first time in forever, a Republican candidate was seeking and destroying left-wing personalities, whether it was Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or individuals in the media or whatever. Donald Trump was not just sitting back, allowing himself to be attacked. He was responding. And this was, for the first time, somebody seeing that the Republicans had a spine. It wasn't even about the fact that Donald Trump was saying stupid shit, which he was, or that his policies were stupid, which some of them were. It was a matter of he had a spine. He was going on the attack. He wasn't just going to be made fun of. He was also going to make fun of them. Oh, you're going to make fun of me on Saturday Night Live? Okay, I'm going to make fun of you too. Because they've been doing this stuff forever. They have always had Saturday Night Live skits making fun of the Republican, usually. Very rarely the Democrat. Simpsons episodes making fun of the Republicans, usually. Very rarely the Democrat. And for years and years and years. So this idea that the crassness and the cruelty is the politics of the day, it's like it's always been there. It's literally always been there. It's a joke that this person seems to believe that just because Trump is doing it now, that this is some kind of new phenomenon. It's like, really, you're really starting to pay more attention to it now because of things like Reddit and things like Twitter, where now the average Joe can get in on the joke. You know, like the guy who made the Trump tackling CNN meme, and, you know, CNN and their crack investigative team hunted that guy down in order to, you know, attack him personally. But that's the major difference. The major difference is that you started seeing Donald Trump take a crack at his enemies, the people who were attacking him. And then other people started doing the same thing. People was like, oh, okay, we can be Republicans and go on the assault. We can do more than just call them commies. We can actually make fun of people now. You know, like, okay, let's do it. I mean, the left has been making fun of people forever. You know, they make fun of your religion. They make fun of where you live. You know, so let's do it. Let's take advantage of it. Let's attack them now. And now you have all these left-wingers who want to wave the flag of respectability politics and how none of this is fair and it's all punching down and punching sideways and whatever the fuck they want to call it. None of that seemed to matter when they're picking on you. It never seems to matter whether it's punching up or punching down or whatever the fuck, right? When Dave Chappelle or whatever their favorite comedian du jour is making fun of Republicans, it doesn't matter whether it's punching up or punching down or any of that shit, right? Nobody ever talks about that. It's only when you respond. You know, that's the gaslighting and the abusive relationship that Republicans have typically with the electorate, is that if you attack anybody, you're seen as being a brutal bully. If you're the victim, then it's ha 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 ha, we're laughing at you. You know, give you a good example of this is the Donald Trump bunker boy situation, right? You would think that causing a riot that requires the president to flee into a bunker would get people arrested. Didn't happen. What ended up happening, however, is people started making fun of him. Oh, he's a bunker boy. Look at that. Ha 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 ha. But then when AOC and all these people are ran out of Congress because of January 6th, well, it's an attack on our democracy. We have people crying and saying, oh no, where were you on January 6th? So that kind of shit is just, again, it's somebody trying to say it's both one side, it's both sides. But the Republicans are finally now starting to fight back, which is a positive. Because who the hell wants to see a fight with one guy's fighting with an arm tied behind his back? Nope. Let's go. You wanted to start shit by name calling and crashing the White House or crashing the State House or whatever. Okay, so now Republicans are going to start doing it too. If you can't handle it, you need to stop doing it. So it is what it is on that front. This video has gone on for a long time. Let's finish it up real quick. Reisman, on the subject of Hogan and Warrior and how it might play into DeSantis versus Trump, says, quote, let me put it this way. Hogan and Warrior, right after that, both of them, their careers tanked. that match was kind of the last gasp of that era. And you can argue it was because it sort of broke the system. Fans had to pick a side. You can't just cheer for both guys. You have to cheer for one. And that means somebody is getting written out of the story. Someone has to lose. Someone has to look bad in your eyes. And that kind of confusion, wait, I don't know who to pick. And once I pick, does that mean I have to hate the other guy? It can be thrilling initially, but it can also be something that is very damaging to the brands of both of the participants. This is a good point, and I think he kind of missed. I think it's a good analogy in terms of Hogan and Warrior, where DeSantis has taken a lot of the blueprint of what Trump does, in so much as attacking people who attack him. He's a little bit more moderate than Trump. Trump is very loud and very brash or whatever. DeSantis seems to be a little bit more politically minded, a little bit more focused. He also has a great deal more control. He has created better policy in Florida. Doesn't mean it's perfect. It means it's better than what Trump was doing. And that gives him the Ultimate Warrior feel. You know, I would take it to the next step, and I would let people know the Ultimate Warrior was a flash in the pan. You know, also WrestleMania 6 was the culmination of the 4-year, well, not even 4 years, probably 3 years push of the Ultimate Warrior as being the next guy. And it hasn't been that long for DeSantis, but it's been about that time. And Trump is, you know, Hulk Hogan. He's been the hero for a long time, but there's been a lot of chinks in the armor. People have found he's gotten old. You know, it's about time for Trump to move out of the way. That part is probably true. I know a lot of Trump fans are going to cringe at that, but the guy is not going to live forever. He's in his mid-70s, okay? So it's over. And he could still win, but, you know, who knows how much longer he's going to last. So going with DeSantis means DeSantis is younger. He has a lot of crossover audience with Trump. He's not going to lose a lot. But what things fall apart is the Hogan Warrior analogy falls apart because it wasn't because of anything that happened at WrestleMania that the careers of Hogan and Warrior collapsed. It was due to creative stagnation. Okay. The WWF became creatively stagnant after WrestleMania 6. They really didn't have anything big happen for several years after. Now, understand part of this was because Vince was under investigation for steroids, and so they were in a rush to, you know, kind of move things along, get the title off of, you know, Warrior, get the title off Hogan, get the title more on a natural athlete. And so 2 years later, you've got WrestleMania 8, and the main event is, you know, well, it's still Hogan, but the title match is Savage versus Flair. You know, two much smaller, more athletic, more wrestling-centric guys. In WrestleMania 9, you know, we're at Bret Hart and Yokozuna. Even though Bret Hart was on steroids, Yokozuna is a bigger, more natural athlete. You know, the difference is Hogan never disappeared. You know, Hogan never went away. He kept getting involved. The company never moved on from Hogan until mid-93. So even though Hogan's era was kind of over in 1990, he kept finding his way to get into the main event. He was in the main event in 1991. He was in the main event in 1992. He was in the main event again in 1993. And people were kind of like, okay, you know, Hogan ain't what he used to be, and yet he won't go away. So it was that creative stagnation that really caused the problem. If Hogan had been moved out of the way properly, who knows what would have happened. If the creative would have been better in terms of Hogan still being there, it might have been a little bit better. But it wasn't just, well, Hogan lost to the Warrior, therefore his brand is damaged, or the Warrior beat Hogan, therefore his brand was damaged. It's like, well, no, there was a lot of stuff around that time, you know, that did the damage. In politics, however, this is what they do. They take chunks out of each other literally all the time. And at the end, they're going to agree to work together, probably in one way or the other. You know, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And then there's going to be issues. Now, I think that what ends up happening, particularly on the left, is somebody like Bernie Sanders. You know, his base again gets eaten alive and forced to join the Joe Biden side of things, and they hate Joe Biden, they hate Hillary Clinton, but they have to join them anyway. That does incredible brand damage to like Bernie Sanders. Then they create this conspiracy theory in their head where Bernie was cheated and all this kind of stuff. Nobody cares about that shit, right? But this is the political process. Everybody who enters the political process are going to have their own fan base. Now, most of them are not going to be superstars like Trump or DeSantis, and that's usually how politics works, is that, you know, there are superstars on both sides. But ultimately, there can only be one president and one vice president, and therefore they're going to take chunks out of each other. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama was in a similar situation. It didn't do a great deal of damage to the Democrats for Obama to beat Hillary Clinton. It didn't do a great deal of damage for Hillary Clinton. Well, it did do a great deal of damage for Hillary Clinton to beat Bernie Sanders. I mean, that kind of crippled the party for temporarily, of course. Then it was galvanized under Trump. So this is just kind of how politics works. You know, the idea that this is some kind of special situation is like, I don't see that. I look at it in terms of there's a lot of overlap, and I don't see too many people who are diehard Trump supporters who wouldn't support DeSantis. And I don't see a lot of people who are, well, I do see some people who are DeSantis supporters who wouldn't support Trump. And usually that's because they play respectability politics, which I just talked about, in terms of they think Trump is too crass, he goes on the offensive, he talks too much, or he just creates bad policy, all of which could possibly be true. But ultimately, they have a large crossover audience. And so I don't see it as being that big of a deal. I don't really care which one of them comes out of the chute as, you know, the Republican contender, because I don't really care that much about politics. Well, in that way, I care more about policy than politicians, because politicians are interchangeable. They all just essentially pick up whatever is popular in the culture, and then they just basically run with it. Again, people 25 years ago couldn't imagine that they were going to be talking about men could be women, or gay. Hell, gay marriage was a lot more controversial 20 years ago than it is today. And so people just pick up these issues. They don't really have any beliefs. They just pick up these issues and run with them as they're introduced into the culture. Very rarely are they completely and totally disregarded. And this is the positive about Bernie Sanders and like Ron Paul, the people who are on the extremes, who bring in things, because they bring in ideas that seemingly never leave, like things like the Green New Deal, things like auditing the Fed. These ideas, they come out of nowhere, and the other side are not interested in them. You know, the right has no interest in the Green New Deal at all, and the left really has no interest in auditing the Fed. But these ideas exist, and you will often see them being bounced around, and these are very fringe ideas. The left has far more fringe ideas bouncing around because most of the party is becoming more and more fringe, and it's at the point, nearly at the point of not being fringe at all. If it wasn't for the Hillary Clintons and the Joe Bidens and all of them, this party would not be fringe at all. It would just be the Houston, Atlanta, big city Democrats, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. Democrats, which believe men can be women, and, you know, there's no distinction between male and female and all this kind of stuff running the government. But we basically have that now because Joe Biden was forced to pick that kind of stuff up. This is a guy who's been in politics since the 60s. He never, at any point in time in his entire life, mentioned until recently what transphobia or transitioning. So it's not like he has some kind of ingrained value. It's something that was picked up in the culture that he carries with him. And that's how politics works. You introduce something and political actors will pick it up if they can find that it resonates with somebody. Even though it resonates with a small number of people, it resonates with enough people that it's worth talking about. So I don't see it as being Warrior and Hogan, both of their careers tanked afterwards. I don't see it that way. I look at it as if the Republicans are unhappy with DeSantis or Trump or the outcome, They have to be more creative. Now, in this article, they make the joke that Nikki Haley is going to slide in and become president after DeSantis and Trump take chunks out of each other. And I can tell you right now, Nikki Haley is a non-starter, especially with somebody like me. The whole taking down of the Confederate flag, I'm not really in support of the Confederate flag. What I am not in support of is the buckling under the pressure of the left. She has, and this is what I mean by not, probably about 20 minutes ago, you probably heard me yell and scream about, hey, controlled opposition. They can create that. And the Democrats have done so. They have controlled the opposition for the right for a long time. They may want somebody named Nikki Haley because they can control Nikki Haley. They can apply pressure to Nikki Haley and she'll do whatever she wants them to do. And that's the problem that I have with Nikki Haley. And that's the problem why I think she'll probably end up being the one person out of Trump, DeSantis, or whatever, the one person you'll see the left pushing is Nikki Haley. They'll push her as being common sense. They'll push her as being somebody who's not overly extreme. And then as soon as she gets to, because she's a woman of color, by the way, but then they'll find some way to call her a racist or a homophobe or a transphobe or whatever when she actually gets far enough into the race. But you'll see that that's what they want. They want somebody who's far more malleable than DeSantis or Trump. Somebody who's not going to be too concerned about the social issues. You know, somebody who basically is in it for the power and willing to concede as long as they can get the seat. And she's going to concede enough in order to get there. And I think that's going to be a problem. So that's something that we should look forward to. Look forward to DeSantis being demonized, Trump being demonized, and them looking at, and by them I mean the media, looking at Nikki Haley as a sort of common sense Republican who is sensible on a lot of issues, is not too controversial. She's a woman of color, and we can remake the GOP by forcing them to push a woman of color, you know, and you know, we can control our opposition that way. You can't control DeSantis, can't really control Trump. But if we can create a palatable Republican, maybe some of the Democrats will come over and join the Republican Party and Nikki Haley can become president. All right. I talked about this thing long enough. It's been 60 minutes. All right. Thank you guys for sticking through this. I appreciate you. Thank everybody for the 5,000 subscribers. I appreciate every single one of you, even if you don't listen to the entire video. Do all the YouTube things, like, share, subscribe. This has been MagMongoSlade talking about a political article about politics, but it's still about wrestling too. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Playing Sega Genesis with bros. Now I'm gaming with some folks on the other side of the globe. Used to go through a label if you